when you see the death of journalists, doctors, nurses, children, women, pregnant women, leaving babies in incubators to rot to death, it's not a moral quandary, it's a moral travesty.
What always strikes me is when I talk to people who've been to Gaza since the genocide began is, as you mentioned, no matter how much you've seen on your screens, and this is the world's first live stream genocide, as it's often described, you can't actually understand it's so much worse when you see the reality in front of you. I mean, how would you explain, because you would have spent, before you went, so much time, I know, just being aware of what was already happening for those 9 months. How much was it in terms of, did that actually not prepare you maybe for what you had to see?
So it was hard for me because sometimes some of those kids that came in to the hospitals had my last surname. They were my family. And I was treating family members in Gaza.
And you only found out as soon as they arrived in?
You know, sometimes it's hard man to talk about it because I don't really talk about this much before, because I don't want to make this about me. But, you know, when you have, I remember my first mass casualty event, and I remember when they, you know, it was a playground that was hit with a drone, and they brought in about a dozen children's bodies, and they all got them in blankets, some of them alive, some of them were dead. And, you know, what you do in these mass casualty events, you just start opening up the blankets and you see who's alive, who's dead, and you see what you can do. And I remember the first blanket that I opened up, and it was a child with half his head missing, and his brain matter was out. And it was, you know, as you pulled the blanket, it pulled part of his brain with it. And I remember just freezing. And my hand was shaking. You know, I'm a grown man. But when you see a child's body so mutilated, when you see the brains hanging out, when you see intestines hanging out, when you see the bones sticking out, when you see 60% body burns, when you can smell burnt flesh of a child, it's just, it's confronting. And for me, what really got to me was I was just, it was a moment where I was scared, because I was like, what type of violence does this to a child? And we're here, we can hear the bombs going off outside. We're inside, and the violence going on out there did this to a child. And I'm just thinking to myself, how many more children like this? And I was thinking to myself, are we going to get out of here alive? Like, if you're doing this to a child, if you're mutilating a child like this, what about the rest of us? So,
and an estimated 1,400 plus Palestinian medics have been killed.
Have been killed, yeah. And international aid workers.
Yeah, on top of that as well.
Yeah, so.
The biggest killing of aid workers ever recorded.
Yeah, and journalists. And, you know, just the statistics of all the things that you see in Gaza, when you're there and you're seeing it on the ground, when you're there and, you know, they burn the journalist tents outside the hospital where you are, and these journalists are brought into your hospital, and they are burnt alive, these journalists. Do you know, Piers Morgan always talks about a moral quandary he has. You know, for months he was always at a moral quandary tomorrow. When you're there, there's no moral quandary here. You know, when you see the death of journalists, doctors, nurses, children, women, pregnant women, leaving babies in incubators to rot to death, it's not a moral quandary, it's a moral travesty.